For more on this, let's bring in a familiar face, former NBC News correspondent Pete Williams. Pete, it is so wonderful to get to talk with you this morning and see you. You worked with Cheney in Congress and at the Pentagon, both proud of your Wyoming roots. Tell us, what was it like working with him? Was he as formidable as we perceive him to be with this reputation as the nation's most powerful vice president?
Well, yes and no. Formidable in the sense that he had a very definite worldview that he kept to steadfastly, but no, in the sense that the public image of him was not at all the way he was in private. He was a person who had a great sense of humor. I don't know that always came through, and he was somebody who was extremely loyal to the people who worked for him. Very early on in our tenure at the Pentagon, he had just become Secretary of Defense. I was asked by a senior official there to do a backgrounder for the New York Times on an arms control initiative. And Mr. Cheney said that would be okay as long as this official lashed it up with the National Security Council and the State Department. Well, he ended up, this official, revealing something that the president intended to reveal. The president was very upset with us, and Cheney said, "Mr. President, that was my idea."
Wow.
He took the bullet for us, and I can tell you that builds loyalty. And that's the way he was with everybody who worked for him. Yeah. As he moved up through the corridors of power, he did not shed people as he moved up, as some people in Washington often do. He just kept acquiring friends and supporters. I just had so much respect for him.
It's truly fascinating to hear your personal anecdotes, Pete. Cheney faced a lot of backlash. We just mentioned this. Our colleague Blaine Alexander did in that piece for his involvement in laying the groundwork for the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. After it was later found that he was really working off of this faulty or exaggerated intelligence. How do you think his decisions in that period shaped U.S. relations with the Middle East and how it's continuing to impact those relations today?
Well, clearly has affected it. I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. I will say that I think it's understandable why he had these very strong feelings about prosecuting the war on terror. Envision yourself sitting in the White House with the president out of town, and the 9/11 attacks have just happened. You don't know what's happening to the country, and you face the possibility of having to order the shoot down of civilian airliners. And he was grabbed by the Secret Service and taken to an underground bunker at the White House. I think that was a searing experience that very much shaped his views in the years ahead and his determination to do everything he could to try to prevent another attack.
Pete, I think these moments when it's somebody like a vice president of the country makes everybody, when you wake up to that news, kind of think, wow, and something comes to mind, a moment that maybe us as people who didn't know him would have remembered a message delivered for him or his integral piece of September 11th. What about for you, though, as someone who knows him? What's the first thing you thought of when you heard this news this morning?
I thought of my friendship with him, his support for me over the years. We were very close. He grew up in the same town in Casper, Wyoming, that I'm from. I knew his parents. Lynn Cheney, his wife, grew up just down the street from where I lived. So we were great friends. And Lynn said something when introducing him at a Republican convention. She said, "There's no conversation that wouldn't be improved by having him in it." And I certainly found that to be the case. I never came away from a meeting with him, a chance to talk with him in his office, where I didn't feel that I learned something.
Oh, love that. We are lucky to have you with us this morning. Pete, I hope you're enjoying your post-NBC life. It's so wonderful to see you. Thank you for your time.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.